All right. For those that are starting to come in, we're going to give it a few minutes per usual to allow others to show up, and we'll get started.
Yeah, I think your talk on Friday was pretty popular. So why not just expand on it today?
I'm just a popular guy, bro. Hey, when we go out to Indiana, it might be cool for us to earmark some time so you can show me some of your. I don't know if you have anything to show me, but
Like where I grew up.
yeah, I'm curious, man.
Yeah.
I think I've mentioned when I was a kid, my favorite show was this show called Erie, Indiana.
I remember that shit. Yeah.
That
Heck yeah.
was it was a weird show,
It
all about
was.
kind of like weird mysteries in Indiana. But
I'll flash forward like 30 years from when we all watched that. And now it's like Netflix serial killer movies and weird shows about adoptions that happen in Indiana. And it's like, or ghost stories, like everything's in Indiana. Like Brie and I were talking about this, and she's like, why isn't Indiana always has like serial killers? I was like, wait till you go. It's,
oh
it's
yeah, like I watched a documentary on Gary, Indiana, and I was depressed for like 48 hours. I mean,
like if you take the train from South Bend to Chicago, you drive by Gary, and it's like, I mean, if you ever saw like images of Flint, Michigan, when they had all that water crisis and stuff,
yeah,
it's like it's bad.
yeah. Well, it used to be like a booming steel industry, I guess. Anyway, so yeah, I'd like to go check it out, but
Yeah. But ironically, and then you go, so you got serial killers in Indiana, and then you got Michigan, you've got UFO spottings all the time.
oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like you got to find something to do in Indiana.
And Ohio has more empty buildings than they do occupied buildings.
In
Ohio,
where?
in Ohio, Cincinnati also has a whole underground subway system that was started during the Depression and it never finished. So they just built on top of it. So it's like this whole ghost tunnel thing that lives underneath the city.
Oh God.
These are subculture topics for my YouTube
Yeah.
addiction.
I mean, like that's what we did in Indiana. It was like find like abandoned houses.
Climbing.
Yeah, and like weird shit. And you had like tree houses that were like way too high up in the trees to ever let kids go in, but we found a way to do it, Yeah, it's weird.
All right. Well, what do you say we get started for the sake of time? Because we do have quite a bit to get through. So I guess for whoever edits these things, there's my clap. Mr. Jorgensen, would you like to go ahead and introduce us, please?
Yeah. Okay. Well, gosh, what we did, we do a hypergraph hour last week or something? Kind of running the train on these hypergraph. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago or something.
Yeah, we've had some gaps though, so it's okay.
Twitter Spaces, lots of momentum. There's a lot of things happening in the space, outside of Web3 development, outside of DeFi. There is a lot of things going on in terms of federal adoption, commercial adoption of the technology in our space. And I think it's really remarkable to kind of see how Constellation's really on the forefront. And we haven't really dove into a lot of topics outside of what Diggles is doing with US Transcom. Today, we're going to kind of dive in a little bit more with Ken Spedden, who, for all intents and purposes, has been kind of a liaison strategic advisor. He's the man, I don't even know what the appropriate word is to say it. He's your cloak and dagger. He's your we hold him very close to our hand. And I got to meet Ken when I was in Hawaii, and we randomly met at a restaurant. And it was kind of serendipitous from that point on, where somehow our two worlds collided, which included the day after going to a meeting at Lockheed Martin. And it's kind of transpired into a really amazing relationship for Constellation. So today, Benjamin Diggles is going to kind of dive into what he talked about last week, but in a little more detail with a little more slideware. And then Ken's going to kind of talk in and talk about his experience in federal for the better part of like what, 2-3 decades, maybe more. And share, why we connected that night at the restaurant and how he really sees this technology as one of the top initiatives across the U.S. federal government, across so many different applications. And while we might not give all the detail to the work that we're doing, I think you really get a grasp of how impactful this technology is. So I thought this would be an important time to do a federal update and start to showcase some of our strategic advisors that we're bringing into the fold of Constellation to really help us open more doors and bringing credibility into the space. So without further ado, I hand it over to you, Mr. Diggles, to kick us off.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you. Awesome. Well, welcome to Hypergraph Hour number 52. And everybody knows who I am. If you don't, I'm one of the co-founders and I run business development for the company. And I'm extremely passionate about federal. And I never thought in my entire life I would say that. But hey, I'm on fire now and can't get enough. So today in our agenda, what we're going to cover is I'm going to talk quickly on the state of the world around cyber warfare. Really bake back into everybody's brain why Constellation and the DoD is one of a kind solution set. And dive into the federal Iron Spider momentum, sort of to ground it that, yes, we keep talking about U.S. Transcom, but hopefully folks understand how that is the genesis or a mustard seed at the center of a really big implication. Then we're going to pivot over to the introduction to Ken, and Ken's going to talk through a few slides. Of course, Mr. Jorgensen will be peppering in as we go. Then I want to go through a few use cases, some of the featured ones that we're zeroing in on, just to add some gravity to the, the size of all of this. And then, of course, remind everybody, for those that haven't seen our enterprise page or have sort of missed the boat on how we've been positioning ourselves, talk about how we have the opportunity to effectively utilize DAG in both public and private deployments of Constellation's Hypergraph transfer protocol. So strap in, we're going to have a fun one here. So first, this is not the most fun slide, a little bit ugly, and I am not a fear seller. I just want to let you know that's never been our stance, is to go in and try to sell fear. That said, you'd have to be living under a rock if you don't know that the state of the world is in full-on cyber warfare. I tapped a lot of friends and family at the end of last year, beginning of this year, and I said, just wait, this is going to be a quantum year where things get real funky. And I think one of my big, key points that brought me to that conclusion early on was when ChatGPT was released and how they had 1 million users within 5 days. And I was blown away by the capabilities of what OpenAI has brought to the table. And I thought, if this is just an open commercial layer that is available to the masses, I can't even imagine where some of the more technical AI solutions are going behind the scenes, which means a lot of things are going to be at risk, and we're going to see some of the biggest hacks we've seen. And for those that are looking at the far right here, I'm not going to read through all this, but it's something worth taking a screenshot with if you're interested. All of those off the right don't even add up of what happened in first quarter. There's dozens more, and that was just first quarter of 2023. The big one, though, on the left was the Move It IP switch hack, which is said to be potentially the biggest hack potentially of all time. 10 federal agencies were infiltrated, 60 million individuals were impacted. Those that are following what happened with MGM, the reason why I put in Scattered Spider, because that's what the name of the hack was, which I thought was very apropos paradoxically to the Iron Spider. 100 million in losses have been counted so far. And I think it's going to continue to grow as they uncover how this has seeped in so many of their systems. God bless Twitter. For those that know me, I'm not a big fan of social media because I know the risks that come along with it. I refuse to call it X, but 220 million records were breached. I mean, that is an astronomical number. So just be careful what information, that any sensitive information you're using on these platforms. That said, I found it very interesting. And again, we're only into just now getting into fourth quarter. We've only seen 3 quarters of this year, and healthcare is the largest breach sector, almost by double by second place, which is education. A lot of folks know about Genico, and I only know about the company because I'm close for obvious reasons. That healthcare data is worth 7 times the amount of financial data. So I'm not surprised that is a honeypot of attention. And then you got public on number 3, which is, government, city, and so forth. This equals up towards, again, I'm sure this number has gone up greatly since it was reported this month, but 700 million records have been breached in 2023. Simply put, if I had to summarize this, the status quo is not working. And with the amount of data we're creating in both public and private sectors, this is not going to get better anytime soon unless we addressed it using true security by design infrastructure approaches that Constellation is pushing out into the market. And so with that, a lot of people ask, like, why Constellation with the Fed? What makes you different? What's your X factor? Why do you continue to win? Why do they put you at the front of the line when we have to compete? Which is the nice thing is we have gotten to a place where we're sole source, where we don't have to compete. If we're able to find a solution within federal that needs or merits our technology, we can slot in right away without having to go through the proposal rigmarole, which, don't get me wrong, we're going to continue to do the proposal approach where appropriate, but we have earned our stripes in many capacities. That said, when I pitch this stuff, which really clicks with them is that we did solve the blockchain trilemma. We didn't have to compromise speed and security by pushing true decentralization. And they really like that we're a 3rd generation blockchain. Of course, we have capabilities well beyond the linear blockchains out there. And I personally believe that you're not going to get to the level of big data requirements without a directed acyclic graph or graph approach. We've also proven that we are energy efficient and we can scale as wide as they want or as high as they want based off of how much infrastructure they want to throw at the situation or use case. And so we're also very collaboration focused. And if I only had to soft circle one X factor on this whole slide, it's our L0 interoperability. And this is more than just bridging systems, which of course is core to automation and secure information transfers. But we're seen as the blockchain of blockchains. We're not proposing that they deploy one monolithic blockchain. But as we've seen with our capacity to rapidly deploy distributed networks and decentralized networks, we are proposing, imploring the DoD and others to run multiple blockchains that have individualized functions on metagraphs that can communicate using the power of the global L0. We're also legacy system compatible. This is huge, right? We didn't want to come in and say, sorry, we don't work with any of your existing infrastructure, because then it's a moot point, right? But us making the decision to push a microservice framework allows us to securely sort data at scale on existing investments. We just have to augment how their VMs are aligned to use our protocol, and we can dip into some of those systems that haven't been updated since the 80s in some cases. And zero trust is an executive order from the top down. This is something for zero trust architectures are going to become the standard, and they're being pushed. It's not like a nice to have. This is the wave of the future because of the slide I just showed you previously. The way that things are going are not working. And edge compute focus is absolutely paramount. To be able to make those decisions at the edge is going to require robust decentralized networks like Constellation. As you can see to the right, so many hacks are happening that the overhauling of its approach in cyber is paramount. And you think about security by design, we are really well positioned to make a massive impact. And we already are within our efforts in the federal space. So within this, I wanted to talk about the Iron Spider momentum. I know I've beat this use case to death for some folks, but it's a little bit complicated. And I'm just going to go through it real quickly just to ground it a little bit more. Right now, the way it works is the government works with, as I said on my spaces, upwards of 19,000 plus contractors in the world. And that is, I think, something like 90 million people, some massive number of people, maybe it was 9 million, but Department of Labor just put this information out of this year to update on how many contractors are working with the government. And it's not profound if you think about the mothership having to communicate externally with a very porous environment of threat vectors, spoofing attempts, and so forth. And so this is much like a microcosm of that concept of getting all different contractors to communicate using a blockchain protocol. There's a group called the Civil Reserve Air Fleet Partners, or known as CRAF. These are essentially like the FedExes of the world, the Atlas Airs of the world, the UPSs of the world that have a strong presence in commercial, and they have a lot of infrastructure, a lot of planes, a lot of buildings and so forth. And when they're not being used, they have the ability to bid on contracts to utilize their planes to do things on behalf of the U.S. Air Force, in which case the U.S. Air Force doesn't have one of these birds. So they'll say, hey, we need to pick up some cargo or passengers in Uganda. We don't have the gray tails to do it. Great. We're going to put this up on a system, and these crafts can bid on it. Once they accept it, a contract's created. And then here's where the mission is executed. It's monitored by the mothership, and then it gets completed and they collect and it's reconciled. And if we think about this, every one of these different exchange moments is a porous threat vector, man-in-the-middle attack, data corruption, and so forth. And this isn't like, oh, this could happen. There is a constant amount of threats coming at the status quo today. And we have known definitively this has resulted in a loss of lives. So this is concerns more than just operational workflow. This is top secret sensitive information, and also, if gone poorly, can cost our people. And so what we've done is, and I'll explain a little bit where we're at in the progression here, is we've applied the Hypergraph transfer protocol to utilize our consensus algorithm to essentially score and manage the efficacy and the fidelity of all these data transfers to prevent any hacking, any spoofing. And a lot of that stuff we achieved in our last contract. So we've gotten past the prove it, right? We made big claims with our phase 1. In our phase 2, it was all about, can you actually prove your claims and do it within our systems and our operational views, knowing that it is a highly contested and hard to work in environment. And as you all know, we got the validation from the Air Force Research Laboratory at the end of that we were scalable, secure, and DoD ready or approved. That doesn't mean that we necessarily moved to production, but it means that we're not full of hot air, which I'm very proud of. And I'm also proud of, and I want to give a big shout out to Ryle, my right-hand man, working with the DoD. We have not missed a milestone in the last 4.5 years working with the federal government. And so we are really using operational and technical excellence to be a top-notch first mover in what I believe is going to be one of the most transformative communications strategies in cyber warfare for the DoD. And so with that, this kind of gives the big picture. This comes from Firefly. I'm sure you've seen the Medium article. If you haven't, I encourage you to go look at it. There's an analogy in there that really breaks down the understanding of the different layers of how our hypergraph transfer protocol interacts with metagraphs, how all this stuff comes together into the global L0 state, blockchain to blockchain. And if you see at the very top there, you got US Transcom, which is in this case the mothership for the Civil Reserve Air Fleet Partner orchestration. And each of these metagraphs consist of a different craft partner. So they're all walled off from each other, still siloed, if you will, but they have their own metagraphs validating their data, notarizing their data. And as it's contributed to the global consensus, they have the ability to effectively in real time interoperate communications in a way that's never been done before. True real-time situational awareness on mission planning and mission execution and reconciliation. This will leapfrog this group into a whole new world without having to jumble up all of their infrastructure. We just have to make sure that we have nodes running metagraphs with the validation criteria required to communicate to the smart contract that is being used to orchestrate these missions. I think it's really beautiful stuff. And so that's where Simba Chain comes in, is we partnered with them to be the smart contract layer as the application that these craft partners and the contracting office at US Transcom interact with, all while our blockchain, our hypergraph transfer protocol is underneath the hood, managing the data exchange, the security, and the high capacity throughput of all communications. So this is like a small version of the big picture, but the picture gets even bigger, which we'll touch on when we start talking with Ken a little bit more about some of the other endeavors that we're in on. So as far as progress is concerned, I know I've maybe beat this with a dead stick, but again, Iron Spider is the blockchain program of choice. And we were effectively good to go with phase 1 and phase 2, where we had Kinemy, who we're still very close with as the secure data at rest active partner. If you Look up Kinnemy. They've had some press releases. They've been named an industry leader in edge compute. They continue to mature in the right direction, and we believe they're going to play a massive role in distributed storage through their encrypted sharding method. Of course, we've got letters of support. In fact, I think we have a couple more I haven't added here, but those are the ones I'm the most proud of as of today. And in our current activity, we're 3 months into our 15-month period of performance of making the solution, transitioning over to that production level experience. All of our staging environments are active. The prototype is in active development, and we're actively onboarding more craft participants as I speak. And so this is our phase 2 UFER, which is the unfunded research, which I sort of doesn't make sense since it's heavily funded around scalable blockchain security and multi-author data exchange. So in our future projections is we are working on a transition to production, and our focus areas are authority to operate, which is the development environment, which we've already been invited to. Now we're in the process of programmatically getting in there, but it will take probably about 6 to 12 months for us to do that. But once that happens, that means that, say, Customs Border Patrol or Department of Homeland Security or the NSF, they're like, oh, we have a use case. We need your stuff right now. They can grab and pull it and go off to the races and start using it without having to vet it or any of that. It means it's already been blessed. It's ready to go from a DevSecOps perspective. So, and again, we still have that zero trust data management at rest with Kinnemy, and we're focusing on network-to-network interoperability, including emerging Web3 tools. So, and crypto is part of that. I don't talk a lot about crypto, and the reason why is because in my discussions with federal, it's not a leading topic because people have a bias either for or against it. Even though in the back of my mind, I believe that's when things are really going to take off when it comes to incentivizing data participation and penalizing folks if they're bad actors within some of the contracting layer. Right now, it's laden with fraud because the government has billions to spend. And so there's a lot of wolves just trying to take some of that money without performing, and it's not good for us taxpaying citizens. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Ken. And first thing I'll say, in fact, I'll hide this slide for a sec, but first thing I'll say is, you know, I'm a man of faith, and there's many days that I'm asking the universe for anybody to come in and help out because, you know, I'm a mere mortal and I don't know everything. And I know that there's people out there that'll see this and say, holy cow, you're sitting on something really amazing. You just need to kind of tweak this here, tweak that there, and you're going to open up your opportunities intensely. And as my wife knows, I've been constantly be like, please send somebody that understands this to just pat me on the back and partner with me on this, or partner with us, me and Jorgensen and the company. And as the story goes, Ben met Ken at a restaurant in Hawaii. Just by happenstance, they struck up a conversation, and now Ken has increased our pipeline probably by 10 to 15x. I mean, it's transformed in a matter of months. And now I consider him family, even though we've never met face to face, even though we're going to meet here in a couple of weeks. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ken to introduce himself. And of course, Jorgensen, if you want to say anything, but I just want to hand the conch shell back over to you guys for a hot minute.
Hey, Benjamin, thanks. And Ben, it's a pleasure to be here and be invited and to talk with this awesome ecosystem. Like Benjamin, I'm not going to read through a lot of the bullet points that we'll cover here in the next couple of minutes, but in a nutshell, from a career perspective, you know, I've seen probably several hundred unique advanced technology capabilities over the last 10, 11 years specifically, and spent some time really moving forward with the Department of Defense and U.S. intelligence community, looking at rapid fielding of technology capabilities that are unique and looking at ways to integrate them. Existing, you know, commercial off-the-shelf technology capabilities that you could actually cobble together and make a solution that's actually much bigger than the parts by themselves. And so, you know, having had that experience and the opportunity to speak to CEOs, CTOs, you know, other leadership in about 600 small and emerging tech companies, you really get a chance to level set on, you know, where the market's moving from a technology perspective, looking at the requirements of what's needed, and it's through my experience, it's filled the whole gamut basically. So, in all these discussions, usually you find a couple things, and when you're having conversations with the CTOs, CEOs of really cool tech companies. One is that maybe their technology is too early in the market, so there's not quite a market fit yet for the capability. It does really neat things, but there's no requirements out there that are really specific, like how you can apply it to solve something. And so that's one. The other one is they create these awesome, exquisite technology solutions, but they don't really solve a problem. So they're actually looking for problems to solve with technology versus building a solution for something that the market actually needs. And then thirdly, it's the market fit, right? So can you place your technology into a market sector where you anticipate or where the market is showing a lot of growth? And I think right now, from my observations of Constellation, the timing's perfect. So they spend a lot of time building the infrastructure, which is amazing. And I'm one of these people, I don't like to drink my own Kool-Aid. So whenever I see a really cool technology, I always want to level set myself. So, on occasion, when I see something very unique like Constellation, I invite some real technology thought leaders that are in my ecosystem. These are Fortune 100 tech thought leaders, some defense thought leaders around technology, and have them kind of get a deep dive on the capability. So I think Benjamin and Ben and myself have had probably 8 or 9 meetings with some of these individuals. And I replied to them after the last one. It's the first time I've ever had consensus from every single one that there was something special about the technology. And I think part of our discussion today is kind of talking through this evolution that's starting to occur with Constellation into a real technology solution company. So we know it has the DAG currency, but I think that big part of the future is this evolution into kind of a solution company where those solutions by themselves can actually create appreciation for the actual currency, right, for the coin. So it should be a lot of fun from a discussion standpoint. And obviously, the future looks very, very bright. I've spent time talking to universities and to leaders across, the intelligence communities around advanced capabilities and kind of where things are going. And also, innovation. And one of the things that people would always ask me from a question perspective is, well, what does innovation mean to you? Now, keep in mind, this is before innovation became overused as a word. But I'd say, well, it really doesn't mean anything to me unless you can apply it to some use case, some problem. And because I think, we always have great ideas and cool things that we develop, but it really is important to have focus on how you can apply innovation to something so that you can get adoption throughout the marketplace. And I think that's where Constellation is right now at this moment in time, is the door's wide open, and I'll cover a couple more slides on kind of where that's headed. So this slide, this was kind of a validation piece for me personally, because the National Science Foundation is typically looking at, what are the new capabilities or the advanced capabilities that can start making a difference in society and also from a national security perspective going forward. And so they have an entire section of their website dedicated to distributed ledger. And so while we were thinking through applications of Constellation's capability into different solution sets, I came across this page, and if you look at all of these different areas, it really validated that there is a ton of use cases for Constellation to create solutions that matter, right? And I think this is something that's part of the ethos of Benjamin and Ben and the team, is actually doing things that help other people. You can create new economies with some of the technology that they're building. And a lot of people, more amazing than me, are very excited about where things can go with Constellation. But as you look through these different bullet points, what's interesting is Constellation can actually be applied to almost everyone, which is really cool. It's really nice to have a technology that's adaptable, right, to different use cases. Obviously, you want to have focus when you're kind of moving into a market space. But it's also nice to know that there's a lot of utility for what Constellation's been building and all the investments they've been making as a company. So there's a couple of these bullet points that we're actively engaged with right now in terms of like building technology use cases and building a pipeline to really transform how Constellation can go into the marketplace and actually do some things as a first mover in many of these areas. So again, I won't read this to you, but hopefully there's enough time for you to look through those bullet points. And then Benjamin, I guess we can go to the next slide. So this is an interesting, way to think through where the company is now and where it's going. And I think we have a graphic that kind of really highlights after this slide, kind of where the company's at from a solution perspective. But there are a ton of use cases that we've uncovered just in a very short period of time. There's a lot of edge sensor device activity, both in the commercial and in the defense space, where there's really interesting applications of what Constellation is doing, both from an edge compute perspective and the ability to notarize different signals and data feeds that you are collecting from an edge location. So this kind of moves the company into the IoT or the Internet of Everything space, where you can do, no kidding, secure communications from edge locations. So it's really interesting because, the AORs where the areas of responsibility that I spend a lot of time right now is the Indo-Pacific region. And obviously we have a conflict happening over in Ukraine in the what we call EUCOM area. So there's a ton of use cases from a federal perspective, but you also want to be careful when you're building a company that you don't have what's called revenue concentration issues, meaning you're only focused in one industry. And if something happens, if there's a downturn in that particular industry, sometimes that creates some issues for growing the company. So it's nice to see both commercial and defense applications to where the company can actually kind of plug into. There's some really interesting school safety from putting nodes around schools across the country that the company's actually involved in as we speak. Really interesting use cases for data, how you use data from an AI validation perspective, how you actually can run interesting and notarized, because a lot of things that we care about when you're looking at data environments in the federal space, but also the commercial space, is can we verify, is there provenance and pedigree of where this data came from? Can we trust this information? And so there's some really unique use cases from that perspective. And then something I'm extremely interested in personally for a lot of different reasons is how can we use Constellation's core technology architecture in really interesting data sharing, data exchange use cases. So this is basically unclassified data environments where you can share information, knowledge securely and in very unique ways, but also create economies around that environment so that everybody can be a stakeholder and have agency from an economy perspective on actually building wealth and leveling the playing field for everybody, basically democratizing the ability for people to have access to secure data and actually monetize it. And then Benjamin, we can go to the next slide if you like. And so here we have, when I first had my first conversations, I was brought up to speed on the DAG currency. Obviously I've been watching what's been going on in the crypto market for the last couple of years. Unfortunately, there's been, some real bad situations as it relates to kind of what crypto, how it's seen by others. In fact, that a lot of the conversations that you have with people, different leaders in government agencies and commercial companies, when they hear the word crypto, they kind of like back off a little bit, right? And so that's one of the things that we've been thinking through on basically on how we position the solution aspect of the company. But I think there's a market fit here where the company, as it moves into a technology solution company, that those solutions can themselves actually provide, will need, how about this? It'll need ways to exchange wealth, right? In these different solution profiles. And so I think you'll see the currency start to appreciate because it's being used in different ways, and it's going to start creating demand in ways that the company hasn't used it before. So I think it's pretty exciting actually to have the currency aspect of this readily available to actually create some globally transformative solutions that can help people around the globe. So, as we kind of think through this kind of hybrid corporate messaging, I think it's really important that, both can coexist, right? The coin and this technology solution can be occurring simultaneously. You don't have to kind of put one on the back burner, but obviously you're going to see some transformation in some of the slides we're going to cover here that really indicate that there's not just market fit, but there's a super bright future ahead for where the company can go. So with that, Benjamin, we can go to the next slide. So this is a quick snapshot of some of the places where the company is actually having conversations as we speak. So in the middle there, you see Indo-PACOM and EUCOM. Those are kind of the two most important areas in the world right now from a military perspective, right? We have the issues happening in Ukraine. We also have issues in the South China Sea area related to different great power struggles with certain countries. And so when you think about Constellation, these different use cases that are in yellow, what we found is kind of a common theme where different defense leaders see a fit for the technology as a solution provider. So some of this is around zero trust. We've seen things around secure UAV use cases, even secure communications from one asset to another asset at sea. And we're starting to kind of get fidelity around, hey, there's real solution application that can change the game for our Department of Defense. Now, you can apply a lot of these use cases to commercial environments, and that's critical. But I think the fact that Constellation is building this federal presence, it's really a lot easier to go into Fortune 100, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies with pedigree coming from the Department of Defense. Typically, those technology leaders are kind of like, okay, you've proven this out in a defense environment, and that says a lot to us. It's kind of a differentiator. And so I think we're seeing a really interesting demand signal for blockchain technology in a lot of these different areas. Obviously with the Air Force use case that Benjamin mentioned, that's command and control use cases, but there are other areas where, we're putting energy for the solution around command and control, and we can let Ben and Benjamin talk a little bit about the AI validation component. But every one of these places that you see on this particular graphic really didn't understand how blockchain could be utilized as a true solution asset, right? The first thing that always came to their mind was, oh, it was crypto. And so watching that transformation of these individuals to go, oh my gosh, you can apply this technology in all of these amazing use cases. It really has been a awesome, last quarter of seeing how this can be used as a true differentiator to solve really wicked challenges. And I think, that's something that the company cares about. Obviously, there's mission requirements that would benefit from this. And, not also, probably most importantly, just citizens, right? Normal people, how they can use blockchain going forward to actually improve their lives. So I'll pause there and let Benjamin and Ben kind of add any color they'd like, to this slide or the AI validation piece. But just want to say it's a pleasure to be with everyone, and it's really an exciting time for this company.
And you're a rock star, buddy. It's an honor to be working with somebody of your caliber and charging down. It really shows how, I wouldn't say we were myopic, but we were operating within a lens that we knew. We just didn't know what we didn't know, and bringing somebody in to help open up the door. And I will echo that, Ken has brought us into conversations with people that are, I'm almost blushing when I get on the phone with them, since they come from insane pedigrees. And it feels so great that within, no joke, 15 to 20 minutes, they not only understand the technology, but they start spitting out use cases that they see it being used for. It's been a long journey, but it feels really great because I think this is the year that things really turned a corner into the mass adoption lens of, hey, this isn't a nice to have, but we need this in short order. Jorgensen, I didn't want to leave you out. Is there anything you wanted to say before I continue?
This can be somewhat of a confusing diagram to those that haven't seen it before. But they can kind of, it starts to look like even our logo. If you start to look at the diagram, right, which the logo intentionally was kind of built around the concept of metagraphs relating to the global L0. But one thing that I do when I look at this diagram, I think of how each of the yellow circles and entities could be a metagraph of its own, with multiple metagraphs and use cases, or each use case could be its own metagraph, and it's all filling back or feeding back in to the global L0. And I think one of the things that, as we came out with last couple of weeks ago around our licensing model, is you can start to think about that each use case really becomes its own individual license for a permission network. But our vision at the core of Constellation was never to have a purely enterprise blockchain that was just permission, because we wanted to build something that was flexible, where people weren't forced into using the public ledger on day one and had to cross their fingers and deploy a smart contract that may or may not work, or some third party auditing it that we don't really know, but actually have the flexibility to build their own network of value with their own business logic, their own validation criteria, get comfortable with that, but then ultimately use the layer 0 as the added security layer that really kind of references the state of that metagraph. And that might be a complex thing to think about, but this by design has always been in the playbook of Constellation, is to create this flexibility that people can develop their own network with their own logic, and that eventually they will need the level of security of a distributed network that we built at the Hypergraph. So I just wanted to kind of plant that seed and kind of put those pieces into context for a lot of the Web3 group.
Love it. Thanks for that, buddy. Yeah, I know that this looks like quite the graphic here. Working with the federal government, they actually like things that look like this. And if it's too polished, they're like, yeah, you lost me. So this is up their alley. So thanks, Ken, and thanks, Ben. I'm gonna bring it home here. I got a couple more slides. And naturally, if either of you have anything you want to share, please speak up. But anybody who participated in my spaces that I did last Friday, I was sort of on a tear talking about all the different entry points and use cases, but I often talk about hypergraph transfer protocol, or even just blockchain in general, is nothing more than, optimized infrastructure. And I sort of equate it to like a new form of electricity, right? This electricity is safer, it's faster, it's more powerful, it's more energy efficient, all that. But it doesn't really have any value unless you plug it into like a blender or a light, right? That's where the value comes from, is utility. And utility. That's something that we've always been focused on. But my point about the electricity is there's almost so many applications out there that you have to put your stake in the ground somewhere. And we've been fortunate enough over the last 6 years, many know we started with Moby, with autonomous vehicles, to really go through that R&D phase of really collaborating with some of the big leaders. Do we have the acumen to be at the table to really affect some of these standards? And we did. I'm very proud of that. That said, we want to get into the world of this very, very lucrative Web2 legacy world that needs these solutions yesterday. As we saw from that state of the world cyber warfare slide, things are not working. Secure information communications is not even possible. They're just trying to stay ahead of all the hacks that are happening, and it's a mess. That said, I've listed here, these are the areas that we're mostly focused on, with the top being secure information sharing, right? That's that multi-domain piece, the communications peer-to-peer stuff like peer-to-peer naval ships with DNS and network operations center comms. University collaboration comms is another area we're focused on, which is how do you incentivize the contribution of data so that way folks aren't worried about leaking data that they're not going to get attribution for, but they could actually get paid for in real time because those economies are baked into the Euclid SDK of our metagraphs, which is a beautiful thing. Artificial intelligence is probably one of the hottest things, but it does have a life cycle, right? And we believe that's probably going to be really hot for probably one more year before it gets demystified and it isn't on the stage anymore. That doesn't mean that it won't be still prolific in how it's affecting our lives and technology, but right now it's sort of the pretty girl in the room that everybody cares about, or the pretty guy, if you will. And with that, I think artificial intelligence without blockchain is not fully realized by far, right? It comes with this whole just trust the output and doesn't really give much visibility. It's like a black box into how did you come up with this result? What's the math essentially for your source? And so we believe that with proof of source, we can give true assurance scoring on AI algorithms that will allow for not only confidence of data being used in sometimes very intense situations, but also if clean data has a high score, it can feed into true automation, machine-to-machine automation, without the need of going to a central server or a data science team to be scrubbed or cleaned before it makes its way in. Another thing that people may not know is that generative AI is absolutely eating the holy heck out of cloud. It's just because it needs a lot of processing in order to run against those algorithms from a machine learning perspective to be able to spit out an output in a very short amount of time. Nobody likes filling out a prompt when it takes 20 minutes for it to come back. And when you think about situations where situational awareness is needed or any automation, that's too long, right? But the resources are insane. And so that's a perfect use case for all these node operators that participate within our network, that they can be producing results at the edge with edge compute by being part of a distributed and decentralized network. And then, of course, you've got IoT and industrial IoT around secure sensor interoperability, machine-to-machine communication. And I believe the future, it's not even a belief, I know the future is in automated incentivization. I've been to IoT conferences in the past, and there's so many protocols out there running IoTs that don't communicate with each other for a lot of reasons. One, they're not secure enough to prevent spoofing and hacking. And two, the more important one to these companies, they don't want to release any sensitive IP that they don't have attribution to. Blockchain solves both of these, allowing for complete adversaries to be able to interoperate sensor data so that we have stronger standards around situational awareness to protect things like the human race, right? When you think about satellites, even if us and other countries are against each other, we can all agree that we have to have standards of communication and attribution to ensure that nobody's doing anything funky that could really put mankind in a bad spot. Then you have Wi-Fi and telecommunications, things such as packet priority and secure communication optimization. This is huge, right? It's a porous environment for shenanigans is Wi-Fi and telecommunication. And we believe not only through optimizing these, it's going to be more energy and cost effective, but giving folks real-time compliance reporting in situations at the edge where today it's just not possible. It's a big undertaking. And then the last is more of an output, which is situational awareness around things like smart schools, smart cities, autonomous vehicles and drones. And that really comes to fruition through what I call, and what I would like to just keep pushing out there around confidence scoring. What is your confidence around maybe a potential school shooter coming in to a school by utilizing systems that have identified that it doesn't match a makeup of something that should be on premise? And how fast can you make a decision like lock doors or trigger action systems based off the confidence of that data and an AI algorithm sitting on top that's basically watching to make sure that things are doing what they're supposed to? So hopefully this really lands that, like, yes, we do have a new electricity, but we're focused on these areas, even though there are so many other use cases and industries that we could affect. We believe this is the best place for us to start. And the slide that we showed with EUCOM and INDOPACOM, that shows that a lot of these things are threaded into those needs of those different groups at the federal level. So the last thing I'll say is if you haven't gone to our website and seen the new enterprise page, it's right there, right smack dab above our hero headline. You can click on it and check it out. This has always been sort of one of those questions that we certainly haven't been shying away from. It's just, it required us to really understand a lot of these private deployments and networks for us to tune this to a place where we believe it was going to be scalable and fruitful for all of us, including those that are participating in the DAG ecosystem. So we can deploy public or private networks, and they both affect DAG in an instrumentable way. So if you haven't checked it out, there's a calculator in there that kind of gives you an idea of how the snapshots interact with a private network and play with DAG in a meaningful way. So check it out. There's a screenshot over there to the right of our cool new industry enterprise page. So this is the end of our slides. I just wanted to throw the ball back at you, Jorgensen, to bring us home and see if you have any final words before we conclude.
I think you guys did a great job. I don't really have many final words. We've just got a fun month coming up for everybody. So stay tuned. I've been really excited watching the DTM roll out, seeing snapshots on IntegrationNet, people go into beta, be able to kind of explore transacting with IDOR, the testnet token. And it's remarkable to see that all those DTMs that are collecting data, that's real data that's going to transfer into the metagraph once it's live, and then also be signing to the Hypergraph. So this isn't like dummy data. This is actual live data from the devices. So if you haven't signed up for the beta program, please sign up for it. If you have been approved for the beta program, get your DTM up and running. We're going to be opening it up to all the DTMs here shortly, and then pushing it live. So it's an exciting month for us.
Awesome. Yeah,
Thank
thank you, everybody. Ken, any last words?
No, I think, I just want to share with the ecosystem listening that, as I've had time to really get to know Ben and Benjamin, I think one of the most important aspects of what this company is doing is based on their ethos, the way that they are as people. They're amazing human beings, and they've really built this company to help others. And, that's at the core foundation of who they are and what this company is being built to do. So it really is unique. There's a lot of great companies out there and a lot of great founders, but they really have stayed true to their mission. And it's been really an amazing thing to witness, and makes it even more exciting to be a part of, assisting this team, but also being part of this bigger ecosystem that can see where blockchain is going.
Well, Ken, thank you. Thank you so much. And I think you bring a ton of credibility to all the stuff we're doing, and show how we're scaling our endeavors beyond just Benjamin and myself. And you bring a ton of knowledge. And I know I think our community was excited to kind of hear what's going on behind the scenes. And, Ken, it's been really fun working with you as part of this team.
All right, guys, rock and roll. All right, everybody, thank you so much. And once again, if you haven't had a chance to check out all the Door Metagraph stuff going on, the DTM, it's so awesome. Things are happening in a very meaningful way. And last thing I'll say is that while this was very enterprise heavy, as Alex has said on a past Hypergraph Hour, we have entry points for startups, medium and small business, as well as enterprise, whether that's legacy or emerging in Web3. I think we have a really impressive, formidable force to be working with here. So to that, everybody enjoy their afternoon, and we'll talk soon. Thank you for being here.
Great job, Diggles. That was awesome.
See you guys.